A millionaire CEO dumped his wife under pressure from his elite parents. 5 years later, she showed up with twin sons who looked exactly like him. Lucas Rivers was a man the world admired. At 32, he was already the CEO of Rivers Tech, a multi-billion-dollar tech empire built on artificial intelligence and cloud innovation. He graced magazine covers, gave keynotes at world summits, and shook hands with presidents. Every photo of him showed the same pristine image, golden blonde hair styled perfectly, piercing blue eyes that held just the right amount of cool detachment, and the kind of smile that could close deals before a contract was even read. He lived in a penthouse above Central Park, drove a custom electric sports car, and wore tailored suits worth more than most people's rent. To everyone looking in from the outside, he was flawless, driven, disciplined, and destined for greatness. But there was one thing that Lucas didn't have, and had once almost risked everything for: love. 5 years earlier, before he stepped into his full role as CEO, Lucas had been with someone who didn't fit the blueprint his family had laid out for his life. Her name was Amber Wallace. She wasn't a socialite or a tech investor. She wasn't born into money. She was a graduate student, studying architecture on scholarships and side jobs, with paint on her jeans and notebooks full of messy sketches. She had long brown hair, expressive blue eyes, and a way of looking at Lucas that made him feel like he was more than his title. With her, he didn't have to perform. With her, he laughed louder, slept better, dreamed more freely. They met at a charity event he had only attended out of obligation. She was there helping set up the stage lights, and he bumped into her while checking his phone. It was the most human moment he'd had in months. Their relationship bloomed in private. Long walks through the city. Takeout on rooftops. Late-night conversations about dreams and fears. She didn't care about his money. She teased him about his expensive watch and refused to let him pay her rent. She made him feel real in a world where everything about him felt curated. For the first time in his life, he imagined a future that didn't revolve around quarterly earnings or board meetings. He imagined a small wedding, a cozy home, kids with blue eyes and wild energy. He imagined Amber in every version of that future. But his parents had other plans. When they found out about Amber, the reaction was immediate and brutal. His father, Charles Rivers, the chairman of the board and one of the coldest men Lucas had ever known, summoned him into his office and laid it out plainly: she is not your equal. She dilutes your image. Marry her, and we'll begin the process of removing you from succession. His mother didn't bother hiding her disdain either. Do you really want to embarrass the family? She asked. What will shareholders think when they see you with someone so average? Lucas tried to resist. He fought. He told them he didn't care about perception. But Rivers Tech wasn't just a company. It was an empire, passed down from 3 generations. His name was a brand. His face was an investment. And as the pressure mounted, from family, from the board, from advisors reminding him of his obligations, Lucas felt the walls close in. The worst part? He never even told Amber the truth. One day, he simply ended it. No explanation. No fight. He said he needed to focus on his career and walked out of her apartment, leaving behind the woman he had imagined forever with. Amber called once. Then twice. Then she stopped. He never answered. He buried himself in work and tried to convince himself it had been necessary. That it was for the best. But there wasn't a single day that passed when he didn't think about her, when he didn't see something that reminded him of the life he'd left behind. He missed her laugh. The way she said his name when she was mad. The way she made him feel like a man, not a product. Still, he never reached out. Because to admit he was wrong would mean facing everything he gave up. And at that time, Lucas Rivers didn't know how to face regret. Not yet. Amber Wallace had never believed in fairy tales, but falling in love with Lucas Rivers had felt dangerously close to one. For a brief time, it had been more than she ever dreamed possible. She remembered the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. She remembered the rooftop nights, when the city lights made the sky feel endless, and Lucas whispered about wanting to escape the world of cameras and boardrooms, just to live a normal life, with her. She believed him. She believed every word, every promise left unfinished in the spaces between kisses and silence. But one day, he was gone. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a cool, carefully worded message that he needed space to focus on his future. She had waited for him to call. She tried to find him, sent one long, desperate voicemail, then another. But the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was deliberate. It was final. And so she stopped waiting. Amber threw herself into her work, pouring her heartbreak into blueprints and deadlines, trying to lose herself in her studies. But just weeks later, she began to feel the changes in her body. The fatigue. The nausea. The delay. She told herself it was stress. But when she took a pregnancy test and saw the result, her breath caught. She didn't cry. She just stood in the bathroom, staring at the word positive as if it were written in another language. Then she sat on the edge of her bed and said nothing for a very long time. The doctor confirmed her pregnancy. But the ultrasound revealed something she hadn't expected: 2 heartbeats. Twin boys. 2 lives growing inside her. 2 reminders of a man who had walked away without ever turning back. She considered calling him again. She imagined what she would say. But then she remembered the voicemail. The cold response from his assistant. The way he had vanished like she meant nothing. And she realized she couldn't go through that again. So she didn't call. She didn't write. She erased his number. She accepted, deep in her soul, that he wasn't coming back. Amber decided to leave New York. There was no place for her there anymore. She took a job in a smaller city, in a drafting office where no one asked questions about her past. She rented a modest apartment and lived carefully, saving every cent. Pregnancy with twins was hard, but she was harder. She worked through swollen feet, sleepless nights, and the fear that she was completely alone in the world. She took prenatal vitamins with food stamps. She skipped meals to pay for baby clothes. And when the time came, she gave birth to 2 healthy, beautiful boys, Logan and Simon. They had blonde hair from the very beginning, and the bluest eyes she had ever seen. It was like looking at 2 tiny versions of the man she had once loved. At first, it broke her heart to see him in their faces. But over time, that feeling softened into something else, something fiercer. Love. Not for what could have been, but for what was. Her sons were everything. They were wild and loud and messy and perfect. They were the reason she got out of bed when her body ached and her bank account hit zero. She worked late nights, held freelance gigs, took on commissions, floor plans for shops, cafes, even barns, anything that kept the lights on. She fed her boys, clothed them, kissed their bruises, and read them bedtime stories even when she was too tired to stand. Amber never said Lucas's name. Not once. When the boys asked why they didn't have a dad, she told them the truth, gently, that sometimes people leave because they're afraid of love, and it's not their fault, and it's not ours either. She didn't speak of revenge. She didn't dwell on the past. She poured all of her energy into raising 2 kind, curious, and brave little boys who had no idea they carried a last name that once ruled a city. And still, late at night, when they were asleep, she sometimes found herself imagining what Lucas would say if he saw them. Would he recognize them as his? Would he feel anything at all? Or would he do what he did best, turn away and pretend none of it mattered? She told herself it didn't matter. That she didn't care. That she had built a life without him. And it was true. But fate, as always, had other plans. The invitation had come unexpectedly, tucked into the inbox of Amber's modest freelance email with a generic subject line: Architectural Futures Forum, Speaker Selection. At first, she assumed it was a mistake. She had never presented at any major event, let alone one in New York City. But the message was real. They had reviewed her design proposal for a women's shelter, sustainable, low-cost, and community-focused, and wanted her to speak on the panel. It wasn't paid, but they would cover travel and accommodations. It was the break she had dreamed of for years, and the kind of recognition she never thought she'd receive as a solo mother of two, hustling in the background of the architectural world. She hesitated only for a moment. Then she said yes. Returning to New York after 5 years felt surreal. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar. She arrived with Logan and Simon in tow, two energetic 5-year-olds who asked non-stop questions on the flight, who stared wide-eyed at the skyline and said the buildings looked like Lego towers. She dressed them neatly for the forum, in little collared shirts and clean sneakers, and packed a bag full of coloring books and snacks to keep them occupied while she presented. She had no one to watch them, and she wasn't about to let that stop her. They sat patiently near the back of the exhibit space as she stood beside her shelter model, her palms slightly sweaty, her heart racing. The event was hosted in a high-rise downtown, glass walls wrapping around the venue, sunlight pouring in. She tried not to think about the possibility of running into anyone she knew. New York was big. He wouldn't be here. Why would he? Then she heard his voice. She was in the middle of answering a question from a reporter when it cut through the air, low, confident, and too familiar to ignore. She froze. Her stomach dropped before her eyes even confirmed it. Lucas Rivers stood less than 20 feet away, laughing softly with a group of sponsors in sleek suits. He hadn't changed. Blonde hair still immaculate, posture as effortless as ever, but older now, harder around the edges. His expression was calm, until it landed on her. Amber saw the moment it hit him. First confusion. Then shock. Then something deeper. His eyes drifted past her, to the two boys sitting on the floor behind her table, coloring quietly on the carpet. Time slowed. Lucas's face went pale. His gaze locked on the twins, and Amber could see the wheels turning, fast and desperate. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. He walked toward her. She stiffened, clutching the edge of the display table like it might anchor her to the floor. The people around her seemed to fade into background noise. The city, the forum, the years, everything shrank to this one impossible moment. He stopped in front of her, his voice barely audible. Amber. She didn't respond. He looked down again at the boys, then back up at her, visibly shaken. Are they? She held his gaze. Yes, she said, calm and quiet. They're yours. He stepped back, stunned. For a moment, he looked like someone who had just been punched. I didn't know, he said. I had no idea. I know, she replied, her voice steady. I tried. You made sure I couldn't reach you. He blinked, trying to process it all. But, why didn't you try again? Amber laughed softly, bitter and tired. I did. I left messages. Sent letters. Your assistant told me not to call again. I figured you made your choice. Lucas looked down, the weight of realization settling heavily on his face. He turned to look at the boys again, still unaware of who he was. Logan glanced up, smiled, and waved at him innocently. I need to talk to you, Lucas said, his voice cracking just slightly. Amber crossed her arms. Now you want to talk? After 5 years? At a public event? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I do. I need to explain. And I need to understand. She stared at him for a long time. The ache she had buried deep inside flared to the surface, but she didn't let it show. Not here. Not yet. You don't get to walk back into this like nothing happened, she said. But if you really want to understand, start by learning their names. Lucas looked at her, and something broke open in his eyes. He turned to the boys again, knelt down, and asked, gently, "What are your names?" The twins looked at him, puzzled but curious. "I'm Logan," one said. "I'm Simon," the other added. "What's your name?" Lucas smiled sadly. "I'm Lucas." They didn't recognize it. Why would they? Amber watched from behind the table, her heart pounding. This was not the moment she had prepared for. She never thought it would come. And yet, here they were. Not as strangers. Not yet as a family. But something had begun to shift. The truth had finally surfaced. And nothing would be the same again. Lucas didn't sleep that night. After the forum, after the longest and most jarring day of his life, he returned to his apartment, a place that once felt like the pinnacle of success and now felt hollow, stripped of meaning. The image of the two boys lingered in his mind, haunting and vivid. Logan and Simon. Their names echoed through his thoughts like a mantra he had never known he needed. He could still see their eyes, so familiar it made his chest ache, and the way they had looked at him without recognition. They didn't know him. They didn't know he existed. And that realization, more than anything, shattered him. The next morning, he requested a private DNA test. He didn't tell anyone. Not his assistant, not his legal team, not his parents. It wasn't about legality. It was about something he couldn't name, something urgent and personal, like he needed permission to believe the truth even though every part of him already knew it. The results came 3 days later, 99.9% match. There was no denying it. He was their father. Lucas stared at the document in silence for a long time. Then he carefully folded it and placed it in a drawer, like it was something sacred and heavy. Not a piece of paper, but a door that had just opened. A door he had unknowingly locked from the outside 5 years ago. He contacted Amber through the event coordinator, not wanting to push too hard. She agreed to meet him, once, at a small coffee shop on the Lower East Side. No lawyers. No assistants. Just them. She arrived with her usual quiet strength, dressed simply, her hair tied back. She looked tired but composed, and more beautiful than he remembered. Life had shaped her in new ways, added a gravity to her gaze that hadn't been there before. He stood when she entered. She didn't smile. They sat across from each other, two people with years of pain between them and two children unknowingly binding them forever. For a long moment, they said nothing. The noise of the cafe buzzed around them, cups clinking, milk steaming, quiet conversations. "I got the results," Lucas said finally. "They're mine." Amber nodded. "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words that meant enough. "I don't know what to say to you." She looked at him, eyes clear. "Then don't say anything you don't mean." "I mean everything now," he said. Amber, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't." "I believe you," she said. "But that doesn't erase what happened." He looked down, shame washing over him. "I wanted to fight for you. I was going to. But my parents, the board, everything came crashing in. I didn't know how to be both the man they expected and the man you needed." "You chose them," she said, without malice. "You left." He nodded slowly. "I did. And I had to raise them without you," she continued. "While you were building empires, I was building cribs. While you were giving speeches, I was trying to find enough for dinner." Lucas winced. Her words weren't cruel, they were just true. And they hit harder than anything he could have anticipated. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "Not yet. I just want a chance. To know them. To be part of their lives. Even if it's just small. Even if it's just," he paused, his voice faltering. "I can't go back, Amber. But I can show up now. I can try." She studied him carefully. They don't know you. They don't even know what a father is. To them, I am their entire world. I don't want to take anything from you, he said quickly. I only want to add to what you've built. Amber exhaled slowly. They're 5. They don't understand betrayal or loyalty. But they understand presence. You can't come in and out. You can't start and stop. If you want to be in their lives, it has to be all the way. I'm in, he said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. She nodded, still wary, but something in her posture softened. Then you'll start small. Pick them up from school one day. Come to the park. Sit with them. Let them come to you. If they ask questions, answer them honestly. If they run from you, don't chase them. Just be there. Lucas nodded, humbled. Okay. I can do that. As they left the cafe, they didn't part with hugs or promises. Just an understanding. A fragile agreement between two people no longer in love, but forever connected. Amber walked ahead, and Lucas followed at a respectful distance, not as a partner, not yet as a father, but as a man finally trying to make right what had once gone so terribly wrong. Lucas's first visit to the boys' school was nothing like the corporate events he was used to. There were no polished suits, no rehearsed speeches, no executives to impress. Instead, there were sticky handprints on the classroom walls, paper airplanes flying through the hallway, and the unmistakable chaos of 20 children navigating their tiny universes. Lucas stood near the school gate in a casual sweater and jeans, awkward and unsure of where to put his hands. He had reviewed boardroom acquisitions worth billions without breaking a sweat, but waiting to pick up his sons who didn't even know they were his, made him feel like a nervous teenager. Amber had arranged it carefully. She told the boys that a friend would be picking them up and walking them to the park. No labels, no explanations, just an opportunity for them to meet him on neutral ground. When Logan and Simon came bounding out of the school doors, Lucas recognized them instantly. Their blonde hair shimmered in the sunlight, and their identical blue eyes lit up when they spotted him, though they didn't quite understand who he was. He knelt down, unsure of the script. Hi. I'm Lucas. Your mom asked me to take you to the park today. That okay? The boys looked at each other, then back at him. Logan tilted his head. Are you the man from the building with all the people in suits? Lucas smiled. Yeah, that was me. Simon squinted. Do you have snacks? Lucas laughed. Yes. Lots of them. That was enough. They took his hands without hesitation and led the way, chattering about dinosaurs and spaceships and how Logan's teacher said Pluto wasn't a planet anymore, which he found totally unfair. Lucas listened to everything, responding when he could, but mostly just absorbing them. Their voices. Their expressions. Their absolute, unfiltered joy. It was overwhelming in the best way. At the park, they ran ahead to the swings, and Lucas sat on a bench nearby, watching them. For a few minutes, he let himself pretend this had always been his life. That he had always been here for them, on days like this, in moments like this. But that illusion cracked when Simon fell off the slide and hit his elbow. He didn't cry right away. He just froze, eyes wide and glossy, trying to decide if the pain was worth the tears. Lucas rushed over without thinking, crouched down, and gently checked his arm. You're okay, he said softly. It's not bleeding. Just a bump. Simon blinked. You sound like Mommy. Lucas paused, then said quietly, I'm trying to be good at this. Simon leaned into him, just for a second, and that tiny gesture nearly broke Lucas in two. He looked up and saw Logan standing nearby, watching carefully. There was something calculating in his gaze, not suspicion, exactly, but quiet assessment. Lucas knew that look. He had worn it himself, long ago, when trying to decide whether someone was safe. Logan finally walked over. Are you gonna come back? Lucas met his eyes, steady. Yeah. I will. Logan nodded once, as if satisfied, then ran off again, calling for Simon to chase him. Lucas stayed there a moment longer, trying to catch his breath. That one question, "Are you gonna come back?" had felt heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. But his answer had come out true. He would come back. Again and again. The visits continued, quietly and consistently. Lucas showed up at school pickups, at the park, at birthday parties of classmates he didn't know. He learned which juice boxes they hated, which superhero was currently cool, and how to separate them when they fought over the same Lego piece. He learned how to kneel down and really listen. How to put his phone away. How to just be there. Over time, the boys grew used to him. They laughed more. They called him by his name with a little more familiarity. Logan started asking questions. "Did you know my mom when she was young? Do you live in a really big house? Why don't you have any kids?" Lucas answered honestly, carefully. He never rushed them. He never tried to earn something they weren't ready to give. One evening, as he walked them back to Amber's apartment, Simon reached for his hand without being asked. Logan did the same, then looked up and asked, "Why do you always smile when we talk?" Lucas looked at them both, their cheeks flushed from running, their matching backpacks bouncing with each step. "Because I'm lucky," he said simply. "I get to be here with you." Amber was waiting at the door, arms crossed, unsure. She always watched him closely after each visit, as if trying to measure if he'd earned another. But this time, something shifted. She saw the boys run inside, laughing, telling her about the swings and how Lucas had almost fallen trying to race them. And then she looked at him. "You didn't leave today," she said quietly. "You stayed even when Simon got scared. You stayed even when Logan got quiet." Lucas nodded. "I told them I would." Amber looked down, then back at him. "Keep doing that." And just like that, without grand gestures or emotional speeches, the wall between them lowered. Not gone. But thinner. And Lucas knew this wasn't about being forgiven in one moment, it was about showing up in hundreds of them. And he would. Every time. Lucas didn't expect the word to come so soon. It had been almost 3 months since he started seeing Logan and Simon regularly. He never missed a visit. Never arrived late. He learned to sit in silence when they were in bad moods, to join in when they asked for help with puzzles, and to listen when they just needed to talk, even if what they said made little sense. He was careful not to push too far too fast. He had accepted the fact that, for now, he was just Lucas, the man who brought good snacks, played tag without checking his phone, and laughed at their jokes even when they made no sense. But something had changed. It was a Saturday afternoon. Amber had an interview for a new design contract and asked Lucas if he could watch the boys for a few hours. He agreed immediately, and she dropped them off at his apartment, which he had recently child-proofed, despite never thinking he'd need to. Toys now lived in woven baskets in the living room. A tiny table with crayons and construction paper sat near the window. The fridge was stocked with juice boxes, string cheese, and the kind of cereal that came with marshmallows he didn't approve of but bought anyway because they loved it. That afternoon, they built an elaborate pillow fort between the couches, complete with tunnels and a command center made from old shoe boxes and flashlights. Logan declared himself captain. Simon insisted on being science officer, because he had brought a magnifying glass. Lucas played along as Commander Dad, a name Simon made up halfway through their game and said without thinking. Lucas froze for a second, caught off guard by the word. Dad. He didn't respond to it immediately, afraid that if he reacted too much, it would make Simon take it back. So he just smiled and played the part. But inside, he was a mess of emotion. The word kept echoing in his mind. He hadn't earned it yet. Or maybe he had, slowly, in pieces. Not through grand gestures, but through consistency, time, and quiet love. Later that evening, after they had eaten takeout and were lying under the still-standing pillow fort watching a cartoon, Simon curled up against his side and looked up at him. "Can I call you Dad now? Or do I have to wait?" Lucas felt his throat tighten. He looked down at Simon's small, serious face, then at Logan, who was watching him too, quietly holding his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Lucas reached out and pulled them both closer. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," he said, his voice thick. "But if you want to call me Dad, I'd be really proud of that." Simon nodded. Logan gave him a small smile, the kind that said more than words. That night, Amber came to pick them up. She found them asleep on the couch, Simon lying across Lucas's chest, Logan curled against his side, both of them snoring softly. Lucas had fallen asleep too, his arm protectively around them both, the TV still glowing quietly in the background. She didn't wake them immediately. She stood there for a long moment, just watching. Something inside her, something that had been locked away, began to shift. She saw how Lucas held them in his sleep, as if they had always been there. She saw how safe they looked. How peaceful. When she finally did wake him, Lucas stirred slowly, blinking as he realized where he was and what time it was. "Sorry," he whispered. "We must have all passed out." Amber shook her head. They were happy. That's what matters. As he gently lifted the boys and helped carry them to the car, he glanced at her. "Simon called me Dad today," he said quietly. "He asked if it was okay." Amber didn't speak right away. Then she looked at him and said, "He wouldn't have asked if he didn't already mean it." The drive home was quiet. Lucas rode in the back seat beside the boys, holding their hands as they slept. Amber watched in the rearview mirror, and something inside her settled for the first time in a long time. The walls she had built to protect herself, understandable, necessary walls, began to lower. Not all at once, but piece by piece. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the way Simon had looked when he said the word Dad. It wasn't a title that could be claimed. It had to be given. Earned. And now it had been. In the stillness of that night, for the first time in years, Lucas felt complete. Not because of success or wealth or reputation. But because two little boys had chosen to let him in. Not as a guest. Not as a visitor. But as their father. Lucas hadn't planned on confronting his parents. He had avoided it for months, pushing down the urge every time it rose in him, focusing instead on showing up for Logan and Simon, on earning Amber's cautious trust, on building something genuine from the pieces of the life he had once destroyed. But there came a point where silence no longer felt like strength, it felt like surrender. The more he stepped into fatherhood, the more he saw what he had almost missed forever, and the more unbearable it became to know that his parents had stolen that from him with a smile and a firm handshake. He had to face them, not for closure, but for clarity. He needed them to see what they had done, and more importantly, what he would never allow them to do again. He arrived at the Rivers estate on a crisp Sunday morning. It was exactly as he remembered, impeccably landscaped, cold, and quiet. A place designed for appearances, not comfort. His father greeted him in the library, seated in the same leather chair where so many past conversations had been framed as lectures. His mother appeared moments later, immaculate as ever, her expression unreadable. "I'm surprised you came," his father said, folding his hands. "We didn't think we'd hear from you again." Lucas didn't sit. He stood near the fireplace, his posture calm but unyielding. "We need to talk. About Amber. About the boys." His mother stiffened at the mention of her. "We warned you about her years ago." Lucas turned to her, his voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't warn me. You lied to me. You blocked letters, ignored calls. You told people to keep her away from me." His father's eyes narrowed. We did what was necessary to protect your future. You were emotional. Unfocused. You would have thrown away your entire legacy for a girl who had nothing. Lucas took a breath, the fury rising in his chest. That girl is the mother of my children. The boys you never even cared to know existed. She raised them alone. With nothing. And they turned out better than anything this family ever produced. His mother stood, her voice clipped. Don't be dramatic. You think we haven't sacrificed for you? For this name? Your success. My success, Lucas interrupted, has nothing to do with this name anymore. The company, the image, the money, none of it matters if it costs me my humanity. You tried to make me choose between love and legacy, and I listened to you. I walked away from the only real thing I had. But I won't make that mistake again. There was a heavy silence. His father leaned back, his tone suddenly cooler, more strategic. So what now? You're going to play house with some woman and pretend you're a family man? You think the world will buy that? Lucas looked at him, disgusted. I don't care what the world buys. I care what Logan and Simon see when they look at me. I care what kind of man I am when I tuck them in at night. And I care about the woman who carried that weight when I walked away. His mother opened her mouth, but he didn't let her speak. I'm not here for your blessing. I'm here to tell you that your control ends here. If you can't accept my family, you won't be part of our lives. That's your choice. But I'm done living under your version of success. They didn't respond right away. There was a crack in the room, a visible fracture in the illusion of power they'd always held over him. For the first time, Lucas wasn't the boy seeking approval. He was the man drawing the line. I pity you, he added quietly. You'll never know them. You'll never get to hear Logan explain how he thinks the moon controls feelings, or see the way Simon draws his dreams. You'll miss it all. And one day, you'll realize you traded your grandchildren for control. He turned and walked out, leaving them in their perfect, empty house. When he got back to his apartment, Amber and the boys were waiting. She looked up when he entered, reading his face in an instant. You told them, she said. He nodded. Everything. And? They didn't take it well. Amber stepped closer. Do you regret it? Lucas looked at his sons, who were building towers from blocks on the floor, their laughter echoing through the room. Not for a second, he said. That evening, after the boys were in bed, Amber handed him a small box. Inside was a photograph, one she'd taken weeks ago when he wasn't looking. He was sitting in the grass at the park, Simon on his lap, Logan leaning against his side, all three of them mid-laughter. She had printed it, framed it. A silent gesture. A thank you. A beginning. Lucas held the photo for a long time before placing it on the bookshelf beside the boys' art projects. He no longer needed validation from anyone but them. His family. His future. The life he chose, finally, on his own terms. Autumn in the city had a way of softening everything. The sharp angles of buildings blurred under golden light, the noise of traffic seemed gentler, and even the wind carried a kind of quiet. For Lucas, the change of seasons mirrored what was happening inside him, something long cold had begun to thaw, and in its place was a warmth he had once feared he didn't deserve. It had been nearly a year since he'd found out about Logan and Simon, and every day since had been a choice. He had chosen them. Chosen Amber. Chosen to show up over and over again, not as the perfect man, but as a present one. Life wasn't flawless, but it was full. His mornings began with spilled cereal, mismatched socks, and the chaos of getting 2 5-year-olds out the door. His nights ended with bedtime stories and small hands curled into his shirt as they drifted off beside him. His apartment had long since transformed from a sleek, lifeless bachelor space into a warm, lived-in home where finger paintings lined the walls and tiny sneakers were always kicked off near the door. The boys called him Dad now, without hesitation. Sometimes in excitement. Sometimes in frustration. Sometimes in whispers when they needed comfort. And every single time, it still hit him with the quiet force of wonder. Amber had softened too. Not completely, there were still moments where the weight of their history made her withdraw just slightly, but those moments were fewer now, and always followed by something small but meaningful, a look, a hand on his back, a sentence left unfinished but understood. They had built trust again, not through dramatic apologies or grand gestures, but through the simple rhythm of shared responsibility and mutual care. He respected her more than ever, not just for raising the boys alone, but for doing it without ever letting her pain make her bitter. She had every reason to shut him out forever, but she didn't. And that forgiveness, unspoken but felt, was the greatest gift he had ever been given. One Saturday morning, as the boys played in the living room and Amber brewed coffee in the kitchen, Lucas stood at the window with a small box in his hand. It wasn't velvet-lined or brand name. It was simple, clean, and carefully chosen. Inside was a ring, delicate but strong. He had spent months thinking about how to ask her. At first, he imagined something big, roses, photographers, some sweeping gesture with the skyline behind them. But that wasn't their story. Their story had been rebuilt in quiet hours, in soft apologies, in Lego-strewn halls and crayon-signed notes. It didn't need fireworks. It needed truth. He walked into the kitchen and waited until she looked up. She raised an eyebrow at the seriousness on his face. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "That's kind of the point." He took her hand and led her into the living room where the boys were still playing. They looked up, curious but not surprised. Lucas got down on one knee, and for a moment, everything around him faded into stillness. "I don't want to rewrite the past," he said. "I just want to write the rest of the story with you in it. As your partner. As the father of our boys. As the man who finally understands what it means to love fully and show up completely." Amber's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She was too strong for that. She smiled, small at first, then wider, and nodded. "Yes," she said simply. "Because I don't need perfect. I just need you." The boys clapped, not entirely sure what had just happened, but sensing it was something good. They piled into his arms, knocking him off balance until they all collapsed into a laughing heap on the rug. The wedding came a few months later. It wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. They held it in the small community garden Amber helped design years ago. Friends gathered, close and quiet, sitting between rows of late-blooming marigolds and ivy-covered fences. The boys wore matching vests and carried the rings, too excited to walk slowly down the aisle. Amber wore a simple ivory dress, her hair loose, a daisy tucked behind one ear. Lucas couldn't stop smiling as she walked toward him, her step steady, her eyes locked on his. There were no speeches about destiny, no quotes from poems. Just vows spoken from the heart, short, honest, unpolished. Promises to choose each other, not only on the bright days but on the hard ones too. Promises to parent as a team. To make mistakes and forgive them. To hold each other accountable and hold each other close. When they kissed, it wasn't the kind of kiss that marked a beginning. It was the kind that sealed something already built, slowly, painfully, beautifully. Afterward, as the sun dipped low and the garden glowed in golden light, Logan and Simon ran through the grass, shrieking with joy. Lucas stood watching them, his hand wrapped around Amber's, his chest full of a peace he had never known in his previous life of boardrooms and silence. He had once believed success meant power, image, control. But standing there, barefoot in a garden with the love of his life beside him and his sons chasing butterflies in front of him, he finally understood what it really meant. He was home. Fully. Finally. And this time, he wasn't going anywhere. The ending of this story isn't just satisfying, it's quietly powerful. It doesn't rely on over-the-top redemption or fairy tale perfection, but instead celebrates the slow, human work of rebuilding. Lucas's transformation isn't instant, it's earned, step by step, through presence, humility, and a willingness to face what he once ran from. That's what makes it meaningful. Amber's strength is the emotional backbone of the story. She never needed saving. She needed respect, consistency, and truth, and in the end, she got all three, not because she forgave easily, but because she knew her worth. The love they rediscover is not naive or romanticized. It's mature, layered with pain and healing, and stronger because of what they've survived. The final image, a family grounded in love, choice, and second chances, isn't just beautiful. It's hopeful. It reminds us that broken things aren't always lost. Sometimes, they're just waiting to be rebuilt, brick by honest brick.